Hello and most welcome to 1868 of the series, of the H series. We will today look further into the article by Francis Y. Lin, The Grammatical Nature of Wittgenstein's Private Language Investigation. Last time, 1865, we took a good look at how we are interwoven with the surrounding actions. We will continue in the cheese example, and to that we were also adding paragraphs as 265 to 271. These are not strictly part of this argument, but they are to show that the alternative is impossible. And also when it comes to the pain, the idea of having a pain without having any of the primitive signs of pain simply does not make any sense. Although, as pointed out, when it comes to the difference or the careful distinction, I would say, between abnormal and normal use. In some abnormal cases, it could happen that pain is mentioned or thought or pointed to, could be an ostensive. I can point to my foot and say I have a pain, but there is no sign of the pain. And once more, we also clarified that the facts brought out by Wittgenstein are indisputable. Strictly speaking, there are no alternatives whatsoever. They cannot be questioned because they are, so to speak, self-evident. The term "they go without questioning" or "they go without any doubt whatsoever" is pretty close to the case. And I also like at the end here, it comes up a misunderstanding. The last or the penultimate or penultimate sentence on where you work, Al, if you go down just a little bit, if you please. Sorry. There is a nice one there. The individualist says that you can have a private language by yourself, isolated on an island or something similar. That is also something that is powerfully questioned. And I had a little thinking here that you could see those things that the analytical philosophers and the Augustine perspective make into independent, living without our concern or being outside of human scope. Those things gave me the idea of widening J.J. Gibson's idea of affordances. Think of it as objects. We have different objects of enjoyment. I have in front of me a cup of coffee. Maybe I should stop the video here. Here, I got this cup of coffee here, a cappuccino. It is very nice. It has cinnamon on it. I know that it's not very strictly Italian, but it's still very nice. It's foamy. That object is an enjoyment object. That's okay. This is how it should be used. In my internal world, or whatever you call it, I fancy a cappuccino. I'll go and get one. Or talking to others, let's have a cappuccino. The problem is when we begin to essentialize the word, or make it into a concept. And by then, three things would be obvious. It will no longer participate to the same extent. It will become a bit more private, meaningless, so that I will have a cappuccino just when I had one. Something that happened to me, which is not pleasurable. The second one is it is no longer as flexible expression. It becomes more fixated. Not as loose, not as malleable. And this is very comparable to atomism, or Democritian atomism, or modern day empiricism, reductionism. Becomes fixated, and the point is gone. We no longer enjoy the cappuccino or the atom. It's no longer for us, or it's less for us. Heidegger would say it becomes unheimlich. You don't feel at home with it anymore. The third perspective is it sort of take away the beyondness. The world becomes more shallow, say hard. You have these hard distinctions, the Saussurean idea of sign and signified. Sharp is semi-aggressive. The objects are for our enjoyment, but we can have them. We can have the cappuccino and still have something even beyond them. There's no need to take away, so to speak, material wealth. Do enjoy it. But there is even more to be had. There is a cornucopia of things to be enjoyed. Yes, very good. yeah, the concepts become estranged to us. They're not as close to my wants, who I am. The observer is no longer participating as much. Think of classical physics. And the third is the beyondness. Yeah, the beyondness disappears in the signified-signify opposition to some extent. We can have more. There is always more to be had. The second point is distance or estranged. You're no longer with yourself. This is the word of unheimlich. You're not at home. More than welcome. I think that was for everyone as well. Closeness. And we are getting rid of the idea that we need to get rid of the objects, or this is not Wittgenstein's point at all. He's not an anti-materialist, or he is anti-scientism, but he's not anti-science. He is anti-materialism, but he's definitely not against materials or objects. Not at all. I'd say the opposite. We continue where we left off. It's 4 very short paragraphs down. So be careful, it begins with second. Second, the definition of private language and the no natural expressions features. According to my analysis, private language is a language that no one other than the speaker can understand. And this means that the private speaker has no natural expressions for his alleged sensations. I think that the holders of the community view have misunderstood Wittgenstein's notions of private language and private rule following. They take privacy to mean complete solitude. And think that a person in complete isolation cannot follow rules or speak a language. The individualists who think that such a person can follow rules and speak a language are, in my opinion, or rather have also misunderstood Wittgenstein's notions of private language and private rule following. When Wittgenstein says that private language is senseless, he means that private words lack meanings due to the fact that the private speaker has no natural expressions or sensations. He is not concerned with whether the proposition, a person in complete isolation can follow rules and can speak a language, is true or not. This proposition seems to be an empirical one, and Wittgenstein is only interested in conceptual analysis and not empirical propositions. Third, the proof of the no criterion of correctness thesis. On my interpretation, this thesis follows directly from the no natural expressions feature of private language. Which follows directly from the definition of private language. The private speaker never has any natural expressions for his alleged sensations. This renders it logically impossible for him to tell one sensation from another. That the private speaker has no natural expressions for sensations is the heart of the problem of private language. Unfortunately, this no natural expressions feature of private language has generally been ignored by commentators. A variety of other reasons have been proposed to explain the no criterion of correctness thesis. These can be divided into two groups. One, direct proofs, and two, indirect proofs. I would like to examine the latter group first. Hacker's proof of the no criterion of correctness thesis is an indirect one. What Hacker does is consider some possible arguments by the private speaker that private language is possible, and then reject them one by one. Such possible arguments include those based on persistent samples, reproductive, and remembering the sample. The proof offered by Jacquet is also indirect. He claims that for Wittgenstein, naming is to be explained either by body or by spirit or by action. He further writes, these three, body, spirit, and action, are regarded by Wittgenstein as exhausting the possible explanations of the naming of particulars. He strives to show that all these three possible routes are blocked. There's a grave problem with such indirect proofs. Apart from those considered by Hacker and Jacquet, there are other possible arguments which might be employed by the private speaker. For example, the private speaker might, in a Cartesian fashion, argue that the mind simply has the property of first-person authority. Which might be beyond human comprehension, or that this property is given by God. It is interesting to note that Wittgenstein himself is aware of this kind of argument in terms of God. As he writes, but couldn't we imagine God's suddenly giving a parrot understanding? And it's now saying things to itself. I'm just going to put a pause here. But couldn't we imagine God's suddenly giving a parrot understanding? And it's now saying things to itself. It seems that one would have to refute all these arguments in order to establish the truth of the no criterion of correctness thesis. If so, then it seems that one could never prove the thesis. For how could one list all the possible arguments by the diarist and then refute all of them? Even doing the former seems to be an impossibility, let alone doing the latter. So it seems to me that no indirect proofs can work. And in an indirect proof, some possible arguments are first proposed and then rejected. A direct proof, by contrast, says that the private speaker has no criterion of correctness due to a particular reason. It is impossible to review all these direct proofs here. It suffices here to note that all of them have been subjected to criticism and doubt. It is also worth noting that none of them has identified the no natural expressions feature of private language as the fatal fault of private language. It seems to me that if one were to neglect this crucial feature, then one would not be able to really prove the no criterion of correctness thesis, to make it into one that can be admitted by everyone. It is an interesting and important question why Wittgenstein scholars have not identified the no natural expressions feature as the fatal fault of private language. I think that there are at least two reasons. One is that commentators feel that this feature is insufficient to refute private language. They might reason in this way. We do not have natural expressions for colors, and yet we do have a public language of colors. So it seems possible that a person can have a private language of colors, even if he does not have corresponding natural expressions. But this reasoning is unsound. As I explained in section 3, we do have natural expressions for colors. Another reason is that commentators think that the meaning of a name requires samples. This might be true of names of physical objects, but must there be samples for psychological objects, such as pain? According to my understanding of Wittgenstein, the word pain gets its meaning from our natural expressions of pain. That is primitive pain behavior. We have distinct pain behavior, also distinct itch behavior, and so on. It is on this basis that, oh, wait a bit. Could you please wait until the paragraph to the end of the paragraph? It is on this basis that pain and itch, etc., get their meanings. The private speaker has no natural expressions for sensations, so he cannot logically distinguish among different sensations. His sensation words are therefore meaningless. I think that the present paper can give Wittgenstein scholars pause for thought. Very good. Yeah, exactly this. Fourth, the location of PLA in PI. It is commonly thought that the PLI is in PI 243 to 315. However, Kripke's view is different. He he contends that it is to be found in Wittgenstein's rule-following considerations, especially in PI 202. His explanation is that a person alone cannot be said to follow a rule correctly or incorrectly, and that rule following can only take place in a community. In my view, Kripke's reading does make sense. According to my analysis, PI 202 does play an important role in the PLA, in the PI. But I think that the PLA starts at a much earlier place. In PI 142. Where Wittgenstein states explicitly that his remarks are highly relevant to the problem of private language, and where, in my view, the no criterion of correctness thesis is largely proved. It's proved. I believe that this will give scholars a new angle to look at Wittgenstein's PLA. Fifth, the role of the sections PI 265 to 271. On my interpretation, the heart of the PLA is that the private speaker has no criterion of correctness for using his sensation words or for using his rule-following words. And the reason is that he has no relevant natural expressions. The no criterion correctness thesis is mentioned in PI 258, and the proof is provided principally in PI 142. So PI 265 to 271 do not belong to the PLI proper. And the role is to provide objects of comparison. Comparison. You could leave it there. This is different from the views of many other commentators who, and now you can move. Go up. Who think that the no criterion correctness thesis is proved in these sections, especially in PI 265 and 270. I hope that my interpretation can make them rethink theirs. Sixth, the consistency of Wittgenstein's later philosophy. According to Wittgenstein's meta-philosophy, he only, and listen now, he only states what everyone admits. And in this way, dissolves philosophical problems. On my interpretation, Wittgenstein does this by reminding us of grammatical rules. To which everyone agrees. And by making clear that philosophical ideas are senseless due to the violation of grammatical rules. So on my interpretation, there's no inconsistency between Wittgenstein's meta-philosophy and his philosophical practice. Seventh, the seventh seal, the senseless or the impossibility of private language. As stated in section 1 above, there's a debate on whether private language is impossible or senseless. On my interpretation, these two come to the same thing. For Wittgenstein to say that we cannot have a private language is to say that such a language is impossible, and to say that it is senseless. I would like to end this paper with a look at the following passage by Wittgenstein. The results of philosophy are the uncovering of one or another piece of plain nonsense and bumps that understanding has gotten by running its head against the limits of language. These bumps make us see the value of the discovery. On my interpretation, private language is a piece of plain nonsense.
Nonsense.
Nonsense or nonsense. But it is nonsense. A condition of sense for sensation words is that the person must have natural expressions for sensations. And this condition, which I have referred to as essence, is a limit of the language of sensations. Private language is a bump caused by the understandings running its head up against the limit of language. How aptly put. This bump and other ones help us to see the value of the discovery. which is that philosophical problems can all be dissolved so as to give philosophy peace.
Peace.
All in all, Wittgenstein's grammatical investigation of private language is a fine example of this philosophical practice and an excellent illustration of his meta-philosophy. And that ends my read-through of Francis Y. Lynn's The Grammatical Nature of Wittgenstein's Private Language Investigation. Let us first take some quotes from the last bit here. And we will start a little bit early in 19, actually, where we read last time. But there is a very nice enumeration here. There are 3 points made by Francis Y. Lynn that I think are well worth considering. And it's the 3rd paragraph on this page. First of all, on my interpretation, grammatical rules are indisputable and are known. I think we went through that quite a lot. Second, next paragraph, the definition of private language and the no natural expressions feature. So that's the next paragraph. Color that in cockpit. And to sum it up, this one, which is a bit more complicated than the first one, is that if a language is completely private, it would mean that the speaker himself has no natural expressions for what he's saying. There is a sort of pain, but there is no pain expression. There are, for instance, objects, but there are no vision, touch, smell, weight, and so on, and much more. This is lacking here in the private language. And I think if you are sharing what we are all gone through here, and that has affected me quite a lot, tremendously, it is much, much, much clearer to me how absolutely senseless that private language would be. But let me remind you, that was not the case in the beginning when I started to read Francis Y. Lynn. It started with Johnston. It was expanded by Joachim Schulte. Warren D. Goldfarb helped a lot. I made good use of Edmund Dane. And now with Francis Y. Lynn, he's very pedagogical. and it becomes absolutely clear how utterly nonsensical it is. It is beyond belief. It would never, ever happen in any circumstance that it would be possible for a private language. It's a bit like saying, I have water, without wetness, without fluidity, without weight, without feel to it, without volume, movability, coldness, warmth, million feature of water. And I say, I still have water somewhere. That is how nonsensical, once you really put your mind to it, that maybe is one of the most nonsensical things ever to be thought in humankind. And it doesn't need an argument to be refuted. The third, we go down to the next paragraph. Sorry to jump here, but I think it's very good. Third is the proof of the no criterion of correctness thesis. If he doesn't have any natural expressions as stated in the second paragraph, he would have no ways. It would be logically absolutely impossible to tell one thing from another. There would be no criterion whatsoever. We would not stand a chance of knowing what was what or how it worked. That simply could not happen. We need a sort of criterion to tell one thing from another. And if there are no natural expressions, neither will there be a criterion. So the first paragraph follows from the first paragraph follows the second, and then neatly Hacker does have a proof of the no criterion of correctness thesis, and that's an indirect one. It is not as clear at all. What Hacker does is to consider some possible arguments by the private speaker or by the philosopher on his behalf that private language is possible, and then reject them one by one. That can be effective, and in this context, it is mentioned that the body, spirit, and action are regarded by Wittgenstein as exhausting the possible explanations of naming the particulars. It's a very good point. It's the last sentence on page 19. If you go to page 20, and have a look at the last paragraph here. On my interpretation, the heart of PLA is that the private speaker has no criterion of correctness for using his sensation words or for using his rule following words. And the reason is that he has no relevant natural expressions. And that is put as short as it ever could be put. And if we go to page 21, if you may, Kalle. The second paragraph, and actually that's a 6th argument here, but that's the consistency of Wittgenstein's later philosophy. And according to Wittgenstein's meta-philosophy, he only states what everyone admits. He only gives grammatical rules. And we went before with this, and for instance, one grammatical rule is that green and red cannot be at the same place at the same time. That is a grammatical rule, not a so-called empirical fact. It is not a fact of the world. It is most definitely not the G.E. Moore idea that here we have a hand in front of me. That is a clear, undubitable fact. It is not. There are only the grammatical rules who can be indubitable. And Wittgenstein's whole argument is resting on the indubitableness of the grammatical rules, from where follow rule following a rule, which gives a criterion, and in the context, you can have means, criterions for telling one thing from another. Otherwise, you will be locked into your own world with having no access whatsoever to any proof or evidence, or, well, you wouldn't have discernment, discrimination to tell one thing from another. That would just not be possible. So it's a magnificent, important point that is made by Francis Y. Lin in this context. And I'd say it opens up for understanding that classical physics that doesn't have a natural expression because it's not based on indubitable laws, but instead of a mistaken belief of a private language, the XYZ and the origo that is not situated anywhere in the real world. I think Wittgenstein might be the most massive counter-argument against the cosmological fallacy. The idea that you can have no natural expressions, be outside of the universe, no contact whatsoever to anything, and that you somehow still would be able to make statements about the universe. No. What it does is render all understanding of the universe senseless. It becomes meaningless. It will mean nothing at all. And I would say that is a much more effective way of attacking the cosmological fallacy. Okay, Kalle, please enter.
Let me rest indubitability argument.
Yes,
let me close.
I think you need to speak up a bit more also. Raise your voice, please.
Indubitability.
Much more.
So let me look. So we discussed this example with the hand. Here, only grammatical rules are indisputable. More statement is a hand is disputable. So are such statements there are 2 trees in my garden. Einstein was physicist and so forth. Yet grammatical rules and only they are indisputable. How are we to understand this? Anyone of whatever philosophical persuasion, when making a statement which intends of others to understand, must use words in such a way that they make sense. For example, when a skeptic says, "Only I know that I am vain," he himself must think these words make sense and it's not speaking nonsense. There are grammatical rules which govern his use of words, and these are agreed to him by and are others who speak English. So there is this people forget that they once learned these things also.
Yeah, definitely all that practice. And somebody counted on the computer how much information it would be just 1 year of learning a word. And it's billion and billion. It pretty quick goes to the infinity.
Let me take up something which is related to this. Here from LW. Dinner is tied up with the author not only empirically but also logically.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then next, and this phrase. This proposition seems to be an empirical one, and Wittgenstein is only interested in conceptual analysis and not empirical propositions. But I don't know if I agree with Lean in this. Hans, would you say that? Hans, do you agree with Lean that there is no interest in empiricism in Wittgenstein?
That there is no
Interest in empiricism in Wittgenstein.
interests in
Empiricism.
Oh yeah, no, there isn't. No, I would agree with that statement.
Okay, so
although
both Hans.
it's fairly complicated. Yeah, I do understand what you mean, Kalle, by your reservation there. This is a fairly complicated thing. It doesn't mean that he's against science. It doesn't mean that he is against materialism. But his claims in the book Philosophical Investigations and Settle and the Brown Book and the Blue Book, they are strictly not of an empirical nature. So they speak only about the specific arguments in these books and some more books. They do not speak about Wittgenstein as a general person.
But even so, if I use the family resemblance metaphor as an argument, then I can perhaps defend the empirical view. There are no harsh divisions between grammar and empiricism.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know what you mean now. Okay, Kalle, very good. Congrats. Yeah.
And this is also with the idea of the hand.
Yeah.
It implies that it's actually in the world, already entangled with the world. So therefore, I think Lean's paper, to my view, is rather inspired by analytical philosophy, which is both good and bad. Especially in this sense, it becomes is rather evident.
I know exactly what you mean, Kalle. Let me expand that thought. And
okay, please.
He implies both in a way. When you read the paper, I know exactly what you mean. Very good, Kalle. I know exactly what you mean. When you read the paper, and also when I read Settle many years ago, doesn't it sound like he's defending empiricism? Yeah, it does, of course, because he's bringing in natural expressions. He's bringing in criteria. I would say that he expands the idea of empiricism to involve the observer. So it becomes stronger. It becomes more like quantum mechanics rather than classical physics idea of empiricism.
Let me take you read a phrase like this is from Philosophical Investigations. I will read it from here. It is interesting to note that Wittgenstein himself is aware of this kind of argument in terms of God, as he writes. But couldn't we imagine God suddenly giving a borrowed understanding and is now saying things to itself?
Yeah.
So this reminds me of the saying in Philosophical Investigations that even if a lion were able to speak, we wouldn't not understand it.
No, very good, Kalle. Oh, I like that one.
So both are against both these animal examples. One, you have lion, another parrot is against private language. But this in the lion example is more against there are different life worlds, so to say.
Yeah.
But the lion example can, of course, is also against private language.
Yeah, because the life worlds and the natural expressions and the criterions of the lion is so different. And since private language is not possible, we cannot communicate directly, but we need this view through expression, criteria, and so forth.
And let me take up on me.
Ah, okay. Very good. I like it.
So what is the relevance of this example? I could let me see. Do you hear the sound?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah.
X-parrot.
X-parrot, yeah. Actually used by Margaret Thatcher, I think, in the Parliament, didn't you say?
Let me see. I will show you one thing here. No, not long effect, that's too far away.
Yeah.
Let me see. There is one thing I have to show you. Let me see if I can find it.
Could I just fall in with one thing here? And
No, I will not find it, but
the attending guy, the one in the shop, one could say that he is a private language speaker, and that John Cleese here is not Wittgenstein, but maybe the commentator, having certain reservations, but not completely. So it's very fitting. Thank you very much. That's very good.
no, so that's so this person played by John Cleese, he's trying to argue that this is an X-parrot, and to prove his point finally, he takes the parrot and he bangs the parrot on the counter.
Which is a criterion.
Yes, but my point indeed, but my point is that it's an empirical proof.
Yeah, it is an empirical proof,
bang,
but yeah.
So you need empiricism.
Well, even more so.
This sketch proves that words are not enough. You need empirical proof. You need to bang the parrot in the counter.
Yeah. Very good, very good. Very good.
I don't remember where it comes.
No, I know exactly. I've seen that when he bangs it in the desk. You're absolutely correct, Kalle. We need natural expressions. We need criterions.
Oh, let me not exaggerate it, but perhaps you should end there with a happy.
Very good, Kalle.
You can end when you feel.
I will check it out. I should also mention here, I've been having severe technical problems. Have it been looking okay for you, Kalle?
Absolutely.
Weird.
Absolutely.
I end the recording
Yes,
there.
absolutely.
Thank you very much, Kalle Lundar, for participating. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Have a very pleasant day, morning, night, or evening, wherever you are.